Right. So, fellas, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today, and certainly I look forward to the next few moments in which we'll have an opportunity to dialogue. And to all of those who are watching currently, I am at the Bahai Faith Center, Dallas Center actually. I'm here at 9400 Plano Road in Dallas, Texas, and I'm here with Mr. Mark Gilman, who is the Secretary of Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Dallas. Is that correct?
That's right.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. And I also have with me Mr. Tom Howe, who is a Baha'i who has come all the way to the United States from Macau, which is a special region of China. And so I have the privilege, honor of having a chance to sit down with both of these gentlemen to talk about the Baha'i faith, which I will dive into a few questions, asking about the Baha'i faith, asking about religion and perspectives on certain issues, and we will see what comes of it. And we're so excited to learn of what you believe and how you practice your faith. And so one of my first questions, if you may, would be to ask, in general, what is your definition of religion, and what role do you see religion playing generally in the world?
So my understanding is that there's but one religion ultimately, the ancient religion of God, in the words of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. So if one thinks about the eternal covenant symbolized by the bow placed in the sky, Noah and so on, the promise of God is never to leave his children without guidance. So our understanding is the Creator has always had a creation, and as Jesus, tells us, if a son were to ask his father for a stone or for bread, would he give him a stone? No. And so the loving God has supplied us with guidance throughout history, and so my understanding of religion, to try and make it short, is that a series of divine messengers, redeemers, lawgivers, inaugurators, each of a separate covenant, but all fitting together under this eternal covenant, have been sent by the unknowable essence, who is our Creator, but who reveals himself out of his love for us. So every 500 or 1,000 years, he has sent the prophet founders of the world's great revealed religious systems. So as a Baha'i, I believe that actually Adam was the first prophet of the current cycle, age-long cycle of revelation, and that we also know, of course, Moses and Jesus, and we know the sort of prophets of the sort of Western monotheistic tradition, but we also would include Buddha and Krishna and revealers of religions in the East. Now, in our modern world, there's a conversation about are these really incommensurate belief systems that teach such radically different concepts about the nature of God that they can't possibly have emanated from the same source? And that conversation, I think, is a larger one about what happens over time as belief systems become superannuated and encrusted, with sort of man-made interpretations and so on, which is the very reason why there needs to be a fresh impulse, a renewal from time to time. But to just be succinct, I believe that there's a single unfolding divine plan that these redeemers or divine messengers that we have just described are working together cooperatively in the context of a plan whose purpose is to raise us to successively higher conceptions of our unity. So unity of the family early on was the goal, then of the tribe, of the nation state, and then finally in our time, the paramount need for the human race is to see ourselves as the children of one spiritual family, human family. And so Baha'u'llah, if you put the essence of his teachings down to one verse, I think he says this. He says, "The great being saith, the tabernacle of unity hath been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree, the leaves of one branch, the stars of one heaven," and so on. So I see this as consistent really with the period of ingathering, the time of one shepherd and one fold. It's the time for the human race to coalesce and leave aside, all these things which foster division and look upon each other with the eye of God, with the eye of oneness, and so on. So,
Wow.
yeah, so
Wow,
religion is
wow.
like the operating
Yeah.
system for human civilization. And from time to time, we need to reboot,
Get a new
to
charge.
initialize, the conditions.
And so, Mr. Howe, do you have anything to add to that perspective?
I was going to make a joke and say, I totally disagree. I won't make a joke. That would be a joke. Yes, I think Mark is very eloquent. The simple definition of religion is this idea of progressive revelation.
Okay.
That God has revealed himself through these messengers periodically throughout history in subsequent chapters of a book, right? So he's never left humankind alone without some form of guidance. And the other thing is this religion has a cycle. It has a springtime, it has a summer, at its height, its plenitude, and then it has a decline where it needs to be renewed. So we believe the latest messenger of God is Baha'u'llah.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's...
So let's talk about Baha'u'llah, and let's get a better understanding for me and for others who are novice to the Baha'i faith. Let's talk about its historical context and where it all began.
Sure.
I'm interested to know.
Sure. So Baha'u'llah, his claim is to be the universal manifestation of God, the promised one of all the dispensations. So he arose in 19th century Persia, modern Iran. He was of a noble lineage from a family, a royal family, which in that part of the world are quite extensive, and so on. So he was born to wealth and to privilege, distinguished early on by his service to the poor and the needy and the outcasts. Became a proponent of a separate independent religion established by the one whom we regard as his forerunner, the Gate. His Arabic title is the Bab. And so because we believe that this moment in history is unique, that there appeared in quick succession two manifestations of God. That's the technical term that we would use, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So Baha'u'llah actually promoted the faith of the Bab, although they never met. And so, in consequence, he was eventually consigned to a dungeon in an old cistern underneath the streets of Tehran. He was dragged through the streets of the city in chains, banished successively to Iraq, to Turkey, and finally to northern Syria at that time, which is modern Israel, to the ancient Crusader fortress city of Akko, Acre, Saint Jean d'Arc, and it's had many names, an ancient city. So for 40 years, he revealed the Word of God, was 25 years a prisoner in the Holy Land, never relented in any of this, addressed himself, in the voice really of the King of Kings to the leaders of the world, both secular and religious, and announced the advent of the promised day of God, the day which is prophesied. For example, among the Zoroastrians, which is a numerically small religion in Iran, their holy book, the Zenda Avesta, they await the return of Shah Bahram. The Hindus refer to the 10th avatar of Krishna. Buddhism, especially Pure Land Buddhism, await the return of Maitreya. And Islam, the Khayyam, the Mahdi. In Judaism, the Lord of Hosts. In Christianity, the Christ promised establisher of the kingdom of God on earth, the second advent of the Christ, the Lord of the vineyard, and so on. So, Baha'u'llah's claim is to be the fulfillment of all of these dispensations of the past, whose mission is really to open the door on a new cycle of religious history. So it's always been from the time of Adam to the time of Muhammad, who referenced himself as the seal of the prophets. My understanding of this would be that Muhammad, basically sealed the prophetic cycles that lasted thousands of years. And that the Bab and Baha'u'llah together opened the door to that time, like we pray in the Lord's Prayer in Christian churches, like kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. A time when the knowledge of God will cover the earth like the waters of the sea and so on. So you're very familiar, and the listeners here, you know, with the Old and New Testament prophecies and so on. But fundamentally, all people await the coming of you know, one who will usher in this time of peace and, you know, spiritual prosperity and the maturity of the human race. Really, the cessation of war and infighting and othering and seeing one another as strangers.
So, was there ever a time for either of you when you were not Baha'i?
Yeah.
I was born a Catholic,
Okay.
and I was a good little Catholic boy. I was an altar boy in Mass, and I really was quite touched with the message of Christ. I found that some disconcerting facts about my church and some of the things about the Catholic faith, I won't go into them, but anyway, I started searching for other realities, other answers, other spiritual insights. So I explored a series of things. I mean, the list is very long, but you know, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism. I was a Buddhist for a while, practicing Buddhist. I finally found the Baha'i faith when I was about 35 years old, and the Baha'i concept of religion sort of integrated all the previous religions that I'd studied, because the Baha'i concept is that all the religions are the same. It's the same religion. It just evolves throughout history, right? So the Baha'is believe in the truth of every previous religion, which was very confirming for me. So it allowed me to embrace Christianity and Buddhism and all the other religions I studied. It was a remarkable finding. And then the other, so I still was doubtful, because, you know, I was reading these books and it sounded great, but what were the Baha'is doing was my question, you know. So I started searching for the Baha'i community. And then I could see within the Baha'i community something I'd never seen before, a racial integration, a social integration that usually is not present in modern day churches, at least in America. In America, you've got your African American churches, the AME and all the rest, right? And then you've got your white churches. I mean, we have segregation of religion often. And that was really deeply disturbing and concerning for me. The Baha'is really walk the walk. They really live the life, from what I saw. And that just struck me as really being different. So I could see Hispanics and African Americans and whites and university professors and poor laborers, young people, old people, all together having a good time at different kinds of activities and services. And that really confirmed me. My next question was, I wasn't good enough, which is a common response for a lot of people seeking religion. They find something, but then they feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. I've sinned, I've done bad things, I'm imperfect, right? So I had to come to terms with that, the fact that I could have the ability to choose this, make this choice. And once I overcame that, then I became confirmed as a Baha'i.
So, was there ever a time in which you were not?
Yeah, certainly. I think Tom covers the ground pretty well. I mean, I see a lot of similarities in Tom's path. For me, I was raised nominally a Baptist. I had just enough religion for, you know, the seeds to be planted pretty deeply, but not so much as to become like impatient with it.
Gotcha.
So I went to vacation Bible school. I went to Sunday school. I had really positive associations. It was fun for me. And then my heart was attracted to the ideals, you know, of goodness, like trying to please God and trying to live, you know, a godly and virtuous life. That was exciting. But I also had problems with the idea because I lived in different countries. I was born in Istanbul. We went to Cairo, Egypt. We lived in Copenhagen. We lived in Taipei and Taiwan. Yeah, my dad was connected with embassies. He was in the Army Security Agency, and so we moved around a good bit. And I just knew people from all different religions and backgrounds, and I knew that, you know, we didn't have a monopoly in our church on goodness or virtue. And we used to sit in this little cinder block chapel in Taiwan, and I remember we would sing, "I got that beautiful belief that baffles the Buddhists way down in the depths of my heart." And I thought, Maybe. You know, I go on field trips to like the Temple of 1,000 Stairs, and what exactly do we mean by this kind of triumphalism? You know, it seems like there's something awfully powerful that's going on in these places of worship that are, you know, Buddhist or what have you. When I was a little child, I used to go up on the roof. We had a flat roof. We lived in Ma'adi outside of Egypt. I had a household servant. This is early 1960s, and he would wear a galabeah and he had a red fez, and he was from North Africa, you know, so he was a black man and a Muslim, and I loved him. I was closer to him than I was to my father or my mother because of the circumstances of that life. They weren't around very much, and he nurtured me. We had a bond, and I'd go on the bicycle to the market every day with him and so on, buy vegetables. And he used to say prayers up on the roof, and I would say prayers next to him. I thought it was cool. You know, so I had these memories in my mind. So any message about exclusivism confused me. And again, I thought, how could a loving God, like, you know, consign the majority of the world's people? Because if you think about it, there's over 2 billion Muslims on the planet, right? How can they all be, like, destined for, you know, some form of damnation? And so it just made logical sense, but it, more than anything, it appealed to my heart. And along with Tom, I had this, you know, I think in common with his experience is what I'm trying to say. I also had this longing for social justice. Like the ideals of unity just appealed to me.
Wow.
I could not understand a world where we would lock in privilege, like structural privilege as a young man, and like be okay with that. And like, especially like, how could my faith not help me, you know, like deal with that? And so, yeah, along with Tom, looking at solutions like practical, pragmatic, on-the-ground ways of making that better, like really appeal.
Wow. I think I'm really interested in to carry this conversation forward, and especially, you know, this idea of inclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, as inclusive as many of our religions claim to be, I mean, that's a big word. You know, it's only a few letters, but it's a big word.
Right.
Because it's packed with so much intentionality that goes along with needing to be inclusive.
Right.
And so with that said, let's talk more about what the Baha'i faith community looks like.
Yeah.
What does it look like? I know you said that, you know, there were different ethnicities that you'd seen in the Baha'i faith that you may not have seen in other places. So what does that look like in your local communities, amongst other Baha'is? What does the Baha'i faith look like? What do you have? What do you see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the expression the Baha'is use is unity and diversity.
Unity in diversity.
Yeah, it's sort of a combination. So unity, first of all, which is, you know, challenging, frankly, when you have diversity. So you've got lots of different kinds of people, but the idea is to not make it all homogenous, right? So people's different cultural expressions, different ethnic backgrounds, different languages even, is appreciated and enhanced, you know? So this unity is sort of an embracing of all the diversity we have.
Gotcha.
So in Baha'i communities, you'll find a lot of different kinds of people. Really, you should come to one of our events.
Yeah, I plan to.
It's like the United Nations half the time. You know,
Right.
You go ahead. This is the Dallas area, so
Yeah.
he's got more of a handle.
Just
on Dallas
underscoring Tom's point, that's right. You know, there's a great deal of emphasis in the Baha'i teachings on humility and not vaunting ourselves over other people, and sort of really seeing the multi-hued flower garden that is the human race, seeing difference as a source of attraction, not as a source of threat.
Gotcha.
So right here, over there in the sanctuary, I've seen every kind of cultural expression. It's not ad hoc. It's not that everything, you know, is like, we're not going to invite somebody in there to start, you know, promoting ideas or something that are antithetical to the Baha'i teachings. No. But within the broad embrace, you know, I've seen African drumming, I've seen Arabic chanting, you know, kind of more familiar, kind of like we've sung Christian hymns in a choir. It's sort of, it reflects the worship experience, reflects kind of the cultural interest and background of the believers. Like if I'm coming and I'm a Christian, I want to participate in worship occasionally that feels like it touches my heart because it's somewhat familiar to me. The Baha'i faith doesn't prescribe rituals per se. We have a structure, we have our own calendar and administrative system and all of that. But prayer is at the heart. Fostering the devotional attitude is like really key. But that can look very different, and I know it looks different in the islands of the Pacific where you used to live, or like in sub-Saharan Africa or Middle Eastern countries. I mean, the Baha'i faith is spread to some 200 countries in an organized way all over the planet, and it creatively kind of amalgamates, the secondary aspects of culture, which are interesting, but then we speak a common language. We have very, very common practices, so that when the Baha'is come together from all over the world in different places, we're like right on the same page together. It's like, well, what do children's classes look like in your community? Or what's a junior youth spiritual empowerment program? Like, how's that working in Vanuatu, or whatever. So it's a highly organized, highly unified, highly coherent community, but definitely makes space, for food and music and forms of art and expression. We really, really value that, right? So
Excellent.
Not about uniformity, not about one group dominating and imposing its standards on others. This really it flows from respect, like,
That's excellent.
and lack of fear.
So in Dallas,
Yeah.
about how many approximately?
Right,
are
so
Baha'is?
there are people who are going to see this video who know very well the reality of worship communities, right? So what's on paper and who shows up are two different numbers.
things.
2 different numbers, right? So on paper, I think we probably got like 350 or 400 within the city limits of Dallas proper, and on a community meeting on a good day, we might get 150, 175. There's probably something like 3,000 Baha'is in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think there's like maybe 30 spiritual assemblies that are elected, that are organized, each within their own municipality. There are 5 Baha'i centers with a physical structure. So Dallas, Plano, Irving, Arlington, and I'm leaving one out. Louisville. Yeah.
And what does that look like in China, in Macau?
Macau is a separate entity. It's a little bit off the coast of China.
Okay.
So it's a special administrative region like Hong Kong.
Okay.
In fact, it's real close to Hong Kong. So there we have 3 Baha'i centers, and probably, there's a population of about 600,000. I don't know what Dallas is, but there's probably
1.4 million.
Oh, okay, so it's smaller. But we have maybe 300 or so Baha'is.
So about
Mostly-
the same.
Mostly Chinese, because that's a Chinese area, and some Portuguese and some foreigners like me. I'm an American. There's Persians. There's different, African Americans.
Yeah.
There's different kinds of people that have settled there, and that's the way it looks.
Excellent, excellent. So let's. I'm interested now in talking about a few maybe theological
Sure.
reflections from the Baha'i faith, and one of the first things we want to talk about is your view on the human condition.
Right.
From a Baha'i faith perspective,
Right.
what is the view of the human
Right.
condition?
Yeah. So the human condition is that life begins at the moment of conception, and so the journey of the soul is an eternal journey in the direction of the Godhead. So in common really with Christianity, my expectation is that when I die, I will, my life will continue in some spiritual form that the mind can't quite grasp in this world. But you asked, I think, in some comments before the tape started rolling, we talked about the goal or the ideal state. So I expect, if I'm fortunate and have done well in this life, that the beatific vision of the Godhead will be mine, and I will bask in the light of the manifestation of God. So that's the journey, the progression. And we also believe that there are worlds beyond that one, but it's impossible to talk about that for now. That reality is one and not multiple. So the life to come is really right here. Heaven, spiritual reality is here, not in some geographical location, but the sense of it is, if there was a dog across the room. The dog is occupying the same space as we are, but has no access to language, to cognition, to concepts, to abstraction, right? So we are participating in an intersubjective shared reality made possible by the reality of the soul and its powers and language. The dog is here, can't really tune in to our reality at that level. And in the same way, while we live in this physical and material world, we don't really have the faculties to directly apprehend, this life to come. But what we do while we're alive, influences our condition when we find ourselves born into that larger, that capacious reality. We're told it's a realm of answers, a realm of light, and so on. So the goal of life on earth for a Baha'i is to acquire the divine virtues. We're told that the human reality alone of all created things potentially reflects the sum total of all of the names and attributes of God. So justice, patience, compassion, mercy, like when we polish the mirror of our heart through sacrifice, through service, through prayer, and all of these things, this is what is meant when the Bible says that we're created in the image and likeness of the Father, because we have that ability to do that. We have a twofold purpose. The other purpose is to contribute to an ever-advancing civilization. So it's an obligation to become educated, to develop our capacities intellectually, artistically, socially, emotionally, to become well-rounded, competent human beings who are creatively working to advance the common good. In the Bible teachings it says, for the honor and distinction of a human being is that he, from among all the world's people, should become the cause of social good. And so, by the advancement of civilization is intended not just material advancement, but also spiritual advancement. So, to be a healer, to be an educator, to be an artist, to be a farmer, to positively, contribute what, having done gifts differing, I think Paul said that, it's our obligation to cultivate those gifts and help other people, realize, their capacity and potential.
I think what's interesting is I can't help but notice the references that you've made to the Bible,
Right.
which I guess for me kind of reinforces this idea that you have expressed in the very beginning, that
Right.
the Baha'i faith believes in
Right.
the validity of every religion, and that they are progressively working together toward.
So, just to kind of, if I can just sort of comment on it, I spent the first 18 years of my life, in the church, essentially, right? And it was very meaningful and powerful to me. So much so that, I basically prayed to God, I think there's a song, it says, if we ever needed love, we need it now, And I just kind of looked around at the state of the world and I said, God, if you really love us and, you have communicated with us in the past, then surely, you must be throwing us a rope or, something in the way the state of the world is today. And so my search led me to the recognition of Baha'u'llah. In Arabic, his title means the glory of God. And, his predecessor, the Baha, the gate for narrow is the way and straight is the gate, for the heavens declare the glory of God. I came to see these twin manifestations of God as, in a way, the central figures of both testaments of the Bible. And I saw that I had been given strength to overcome, and that in Baha'u'llah's hand was the key of Daniel, and it was, unlocking the seals placed upon the books of the past. And so I have not emphatically, turned my back upon, my Christian identity, right? I am now a Baha'i the same way that Paul, had been a Jew, and then when he recognized Christ, he didn't suddenly stop becoming a Jew. He took on a new name because it was a new covenant and a new dispensation, but it was the Torah and the Pentateuch that prepared him for that moment, right, of recognition. And so we all know that early on he was not that of a humble guy, but
something else.
Anyway, so Yeah, I mean, I'm not like just laying it on for effect. Like I live in that space.
Yeah.
The Christian man that I was, I still am. It's just to me, I see like the fruit of the tree. By their fruits you shall know them. Test the spirits. All that. Like this is very exciting to me.
Almost a sort of manifest itself.
Yeah.
A sense of progression from one place to the next.
Right.
It's not that I,
Yeah.
to me, a caterpillar who becomes a butterfly
Right.
is still, in essence, a flying caterpillar.
Sure.
You just
Sure.
haven't necessarily
Right.
transformed your
Right.
species per
Right.
se.
Right.
That butterfly is still a
Right.
caterpillar. It's just a manifested caterpillar.
Yeah.
Something a bit different, but still that holds on to what it originally is.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I totally.
Well, I'm really intrigued
Yeah.
by both of you gentlemen, and really appreciate you for this moment. I'm going to ask a few more.
Sure.
And we've talked about this ultimate reality,
Right.
This idea of one day be basking in the glory.
Right.
In the Bahai faith, is there a name for that? In Christianity and some others, we call it heaven.
Sure.
Is that the same here, or is there a different name, or is there a name at all?
Sure. So, yeah, we're getting into, areas that are, language gets hard to reach these things, right?
Yeah.
But I would completely sign on to all the Christian terminology about the life to come, the kingdom of God, heaven, and so on. We have our own kind of terminology about that. But for example, I think it was St. Augustine, the city of God. He talked about the city of God as being something not just future tense, but for the true believer whose heart is connected to God. Like that is a present reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in common with that, the Baha'i teachings tell us that hell is a separation from the one who made us. So when we're in a condition of rebellion and sinfulness, and we have turned the mirror of our heart away from the source of light, that basically, you can see, I think the Battle of Armageddon, let's just go there, right?
Okay.
Is about the interaction of two kinds of discourse. And one, like Baha'u'llah says, one word may be likened unto light and another unto fire.
Mm-hmm.
So any kind of like rhetoric which is an appeal to the lowest attributes of the human reality, to hatred, to intolerance, to violence, and induces fear and othering and all of that. It's like fire, And similarly, a human being who turns inward upon himself and is filled with, lust and greed and envy and all that stuff. It's like inwardly, it's like fire. There's no peace that passes understanding. There's no calm. There's no serenity. There's no room to attend to the still small voice within. There's no relationship with God. And so at the moment of death, that soul is wrenched away. If you're addicted to the things of these world, to status and wealth and power and stuff, the moment of death, you're being wrenched away from everything you were trying to cling to. That's a hellish reality. Whereas if you do what Jesus said in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, lay your treasures up in heaven, for where your treasures are, there shall your heart be also. And daily, like you're praying and you're trying to live in a condition of prayerfulness, you're seeking, the fruit, of faith, trying to humble yourself, walk humbly with your God, serve your fellow man, to try and acquire wisdom and live within that constant, light which is always shining on us, and fill your heart with gratitude and with patience, and always turning to God and saying, Father, what am I meant? How can you use me today to serve the divine purpose, basically? Then when you die, you're moving in the direction of God. You're moving towards all those things that, you held most tenderly and cherished. And so the Baha'i teachings say that, I've made death as a messenger of joy. Not to the people who survived you. They're grieving. That's different. But for that soul who's gathered back to the Father, and the holy ones greet him and wipe away his tears and ask him to recount all that which he has suffered in the path of service to God. And by the way, this is not exclusive to somebody who calls himself a Baha'i. This is a condition of the heart and of the soul. And I know such people exist within the context of every dispensation.
Yeah, yeah.
And just calling myself a Baha'i is not like a free pass like into heaven. It's all
Exactly.
about the substance and the reality of our practice and our belief. God tries he's like the divine assayer.
Yeah,
And he can
yeah.
tell copper from gold. We don't really know. That's why we have to be filled with
That's right.
hope and so on.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So I would, I heard in one of your previous statements, and even from yours, we begin to talk about things like sin, and I'm interested to know your perspective on sin. What is sin, and what effect does sin have on us and on our relationship per se with God? So what does that look like, Mr. Howe?
Well, there's a couple things I can say. Maybe Mark can finish it for me. One is seems to me that the Baha'i teachings are the battle of life is with the lower nature and the higher nature. Right? We've got this physical body that brings with it, all these attachments. Right? The easiest one to think of is lust or envy, cravings of one sort or another for pleasure, etc. Right? So that's in us. It's part of us. Then we have this higher nature we call the soul. So the battle of life seems to be between these two elements to our own reality, right? Mm-hmm. So the challenge is to conquer ourselves, to subdue the lower nature, so that we can radiate the spiritual reality, right? That's everyone's challenge, it seems to me. So that's the big challenge. Now, in terms of sin, I'm not sure we have the same idea. Maybe you could fill this in.
Yes, so yeah.
The idea of a forgiving God, first of all. So one goes forward trying your best, and then you call yourself to account each day. Baha'is don't have confession or anything like this. That I came from a Catholic tradition, for example, and we have the concept of mortal sin, venial sin, different kinds of ranks of sin, and then dispensations, and then all kinds of different mechanisms for forgiving sin. We have purgatory. We have all kinds of sort of imaginary, in my mind, concepts. As my understanding of the Baha'i concept is that God is forgiving, but we need to call ourselves to account. So every day, every evening, if you will, we should call ourselves to account and make a pledge to do better the next day. And then get up in the morning, say our prayers, and try our best again to conquer this lower nature and to produce this radiance of spirit that then can influence the world, because each of us has that ability to influence others. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so the best understanding of the Baha'i view of sin is a small book by a friend of mine, Gary Matthews, called The Metropolis of Satan. And it's an exploration of Baha'i and Christian concepts of sin, the devil, evil, all that sort of thing. I agree with Gary's conclusions, which is a lot of times I think Baha'is, we over-interpret some of what's in our own scriptures, our own teachings, because Baha'u'llah is pretty clear that there aren't that Satan is a personification of evil, not a little god in competition with God, sort of thing. But the way that this plays out and the statements that are made about the nature of evil and sin, to me, are pretty much indistinguishable from what's in Christianity. So you kind of bracket that out a little bit and say, we're not talking about, this, I don't know, half God or something. But the promptings of the insistent whisperer who whispers in men's breasts, the evil one who lies in wait, waiting to entrap you. In other words, that definitely is a reality of life. We always have to be so careful, right, that we don't get caught up in apparently the machinations, of the evil one, and but it's just that it is an attribute of our lower nature. And I'd say one other thing in response to what Tom said, and I totally like what you said there, Tom, but I don't know that the conflict is just between our material self and our spiritual self. I think that really the material world's created by God, and a lot of these urges we have are pretty natural, like the sex impulse, the impulse to eat, and all that. They just need to be channeled and guided. So I just want to, like, little corrective. It's not that matter is bad and spirit is good. It's, they both kind of like have their own aspects. So the goal of life, though, the Bahai writings say every child is potentially the light of the world, and at the same time it's darkness. But so Baha'u'llah also says in another place that God has deposited within the reality of a human being, says, gems of inestimable value. Lack of a proper education hath, however, deprived you of all that which you inherently possess. So it's the task of religion to mine these gems, but potentially, innately, we are noble in the eyes of God. Like, that's our potential, that's our destiny. But if we succumb to our lower nature, if we fail to engage that struggle and strive, to be responsive to the divine promptings, if we fail even to pose these questions, like, what is the purpose of life? Who am I? What is my obligation? Is there a God? And all that. If we don't get on with that, then absolutely the lower nature completely, becomes so dominant that it's like this potential is like never ever realized. And so at the moment of our death, God forbid, that we should die in such a condition. Baha'u'llah says that the condition of a soul in that state, is like that of a stone. So yeah.
So are there any virtues or pillars or anything that you hold to? I know, of course, in Buddhism you have, the marks of the Dharma and
sevenfold path or eightfold path.
The eightfold path. Eightfold path.
Yeah.
So they have these different I guess creeds and so forth. Especially in Christianity, you have the creeds and prayers.
Right.
And things that you recite and things of that sort.
Right.
So does anything like that exist
Yes.
within the Bahai faith?
Yes. So, there's three principal works of revealed teachings, that rank above all of the others. There's a vast amount of revealed writings because Baha'u'llah, remember, 40 years his ministry lasted, and he was preceded by the Bab of 9 years and so on. So there's quite a bit, but the mother book of the Baha'i dispensation is his Book of Laws, in Arabic, the Kitabi Aqdas. And I, as a Baha'i, believe that the revelation of that book was a fulfillment of the prophecy, in the book, in the Revelations, where it says, it talks about the descent of the heavenly city. So that by revealing this book, Baha'u'llah gave us the laws and teachings which will enable us to construct the kingdom of God on earth. So that's the most important of his teachings. And it prescribes, fasting, 19-day daylight fast every year leading up to the first day in the northern hemisphere of the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, of course, opposite in the southern hemisphere. There is pilgrimage to the Baha'i shrines and holy places, which some of them are in Iraq, but mostly today, the ones that are accessible to us are the places where Baha'u'llah was imprisoned, where his shrine and the administrative and the spiritual center, both of the Baha'i faith, in the north of Israel. And some of the holy sites are in the Galilee, but mostly,
We both serve.
mostly in Haifa and Akko. Yeah, we both served there. It says in the Old Testament, it shall come to pass in the last days that the house of the Lord shall be established on the top of the mountains, and all nations shall flow up to it, and so on. So, again, just giving my Baha'i interpretation, I think that the seat of the Universal House of Justice, the Supreme Executive Council of the Baha'i Faith, elected by the members of national spiritual assemblies from almost 200 countries across the earth every 5 years, that is, literally sort of the visible fulfillment of that prophecy, which is on Mount Carmel, where the law shall go forth from Zion and so on. So pilgrimage, prayer, fasting, contributing to the Baha'i funds, a life of service, and supporting the plans and initiatives, the institutions of the Baha'i faith, but working to establish the unity of the human race and serving its authentic needs, like with every fiber of one's being, with one's mind, like dedicating ourselves to that. Like, that's a really important component. In other words, religion is not an end in itself.
Gotcha.
not even the Baha'i faith. If the fruit of it has to be a life, an active life of patient service, trying to foster unity, fostering peace, fostering understanding. And even as I refer to some of these prophecies, I want to be very careful that it's understood. I'm not saying these things coercively or in a spirit of triumphalism or anything like that, or if you don't accept these things too, there's something wrong with you. I'm just telling you my belief and my experience. I'm not trying to impose it on anybody, like in this, spirit of a proselytizing or something like that. It's all good, right? I'm trying to keep emphasizing here that purity of heart is the key thing. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And it's going to look a little different, in a church or a synagogue or a Buddhist, but in the eyes of God, who cares? I mean, if you had a bunch of different children, one was a musician and this or that, He has a plan. It does help, like if we move along, from grade to grade sort of thing. But it doesn't mean because this teacher appeared later in your education that he or she is somehow in contradiction or in conflict with the ones who came earlier on who are laying that foundation.
Exactly.
Without basic math, there is no calculus, that
Exactly.
kind of thing. So the complexity might look a little different. The laws and social teachings might change, but the inner heart, the inner essence is always one. The ethical and spiritual teachings are eternal. They don't change.
That's amazing. That's amazing. No, I'm
Yeah,
really,
so-
really intrigued. One of the conversations that we've been having recently is this idea that there are religions, and I know it's very prominent within Christianity, to view itself as the one true religion.
Yeah.
That the rest of you got it
Right.
wrong.
Right.
Now, I've heard you mention how the Baha'i faith believes in the validity of the other religions,
Right.
and their interconnectedness in some
Right.
type of way. I hope I'm articulating
No, yeah,
that
sure
correctly.
you are. Yeah.
My question would be, though, is there an idea that the Baha'i faith is the correct faith? Even if that means believing that all the other religions are interconnected, is the Baha'i perspective believed to be the true perspective, or is there some other thought on that?
So you might want to jump in here, Tom. Kind of taking a lot of the oxygen, but let's just start with the opening statement that I said like 38 minutes ago, or however long it's been. I'm just guessing, right? The ancient religion of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. So if I was to start thinking in the way that you just described, that there's like one true faith and the rest of humanity is in error, I have violated like the essential core tenet of the Baha'i faith, which is God's not in competition with himself. And the whole thing about using religion as a yardstick to kind of beat each other up with. Having said that, we go back in history. You don't talk to Muhammad Ali was talking about this the other day, right? You have to take account of historical relativism. The people that the Old Testament was delivered to were a rough people. They were not. They were polytheistic. So were the people of the Arabian Peninsula that Muhammad addressed himself to. They were a rough, polytheistic people. They hadn't had the benefit of one of these later dispensations of God, the monotheistic teachings and so on. So you don't deal. What is the imagery that he was using? It was very effective. It's sort of like if you were talking like into a Texas, going into like a rough crowd. Just put it that way. So it looks different each dispensation over time because there's sort of the inner courtyard, the Holy of Holies, the Sanctum Sanctorum, the spiritual teachings, which never really change. The admonition to love one another, to love God, to be faithful, to your spouse or to the people around you or so on. But then there's the social teachings, rituals, dietary laws, like personal status laws, like around marriage or whatever. There were times when a woman simply could not live on her own, like not possible. It's a nomadic civilization. You have to constantly be moving. Everybody's living in a common domicile, like a tent or something, so that if your husband gets killed off or something, you know, the chances of your surviving and flourishing alone in the world are about zero. So obviously, it makes sense to enable, you know, the patron of a clan to have multiple wives, because if you're not connected to a man in that way, you're not going to survive. It's an expedient thing, right? But we're thinking about, you know, remember the whole idea of like romantic love emerges in like French culture and literature and stuff like late in the game, you know, I don't know, 18th, 17th century, something like that, courtly love. Marriage was a very practical arrangement throughout most of human history. It was a way people got provided for. And it's no good to have an unmarried woman living inside of your tent, right? So you make it possible. So the social teachings, the outer courtyard, like that gets ripped up in a sense, like rolled up and rolled back out in ways that make sense over time. You know, even I think a lot of the ideas, you know, Westerners think that, you know, Buddhism is a atheistic religion, like there's no God at the center of it. I think that's a Western conceit. You know, I have a friend from Madagascar who's a very consecrated Bahai, and he's telling me about his experiences back home. And I said, Maibin, Ungomutu is his name. I said, how do you teach the Baha'i faith in Madagascar to all these other Buddhist people? Because he was from a Buddhist culture himself. He says, it's easy. We teach them that Maitreya has come. That's what they're all waiting for. I'm like, well, wait a minute, hang on. You know, it's like, who sent Maitreya? God. I thought Buddhism wasn't about God. I thought it was about something else. No. You know, so it's like if you actually talk to people who live in the countries, you know, where these faiths, you know, originated and so on. I think there's like an elite version sometimes of like Zen or Chan Buddhism that's been come over here to the West, and you know, kind of serves our need sometimes to have a religion, you know, that's devoid of like commandments and laws and expectations. Like we get to shape it. It's almost a kind of, you know, you're a theology student. What's his name? You know, the anti-theologian Feuerbach. You know, man created God and called it good.
Yeah.
It's almost like it gives us the opportunity to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
the core of it for me is we have to follow that golden thread, like the eternal teaching, and understand that if you were a parent, you had children, you probably wouldn't be teaching them exactly the same thing when they were 20 or when they were 40 as you would when they were 3 or 4.
Exactly.
So yeah, the tenor of it changes. You know, there's this big debate sometimes about if the God of the Old Testament is so harsh and punitive and, you know, violent in a way. You know, how do we square that with the God of the New Testament? There are a lot of atheists who like to call things out and say, really, you know, he was going to like have, you know, Isaac, you know, like carved up or something, you know, Abraham carved up his son. Like, really? I mean, that's the loving God? Well, hey, it made sense, you know, within the context of that time. A lot of the things that happened. It's not that God changed, it's that we changed. So our understanding of God has to keep up.
Wow. I think, gentlemen, if we can, just for a few minutes, looks like we may have 5 more.
We'll try and be more succinct.
And well, I want to dabble into a few social issues.
Sure.
And get your perspectives on those issues. And so one of the first things I would want to know, what is your perspective on oppression? And then I'll follow up with a follow-up, a more specific follow-up after that. So oppression in general, what would be your perspective on oppression?
Well, it's good you asked, because one of the primary focuses of the Baha'i revelation is justice. I mean, even our supreme body is called the Universal House of Justice. So we're very focused on justice issues all over the world. And we're a young, new, small faith compared to, say, Christianity, which is older and has many more followers around the world. So we do our best to address justice issues through social and economic development projects and other interventions, if we can, throughout the world. But I mean, in America, for example, one of the primary, it's called the most challenging issue for the Baha'i community is race. You know, this integration of black and white. and the responsibility of both races to solve that question, that vexing, long-standing injustice. And all of us try our best to do something to change American culture, for example, in that area.
Yeah, yeah.
So, we have both talked about how important it was to each one of us to practice, like to take this out of the realm of abstraction and actually apply this way of life to change the world. So, and we believe that the Word of God is the one power that can transmute copper into gold, satanic power into heavenly energy. So it's as we engage with that Word of God, it affects a transformation in us. We also, because of the nature of the day we live in, look forward to the transformation of all human institutions ultimately under the influence, under the impact of this revelation of God, which drives socio-cultural evolution forward. So I just would say that, as I reorganize my identity as a human being away from my lower nature, my animal self, the sinful self, around the names of God, around justice, compassion, and mercy, I would suggest that all of our institutions have been structured as a series of contests. Our economic systems, our systems of governance, our systems of law and jurisprudential systems, everything is we look at a human being as a relentless maximizer of self-interest whose primary duty on earth is to light up the pleasure centers of his brain, and that death is essentially at best a kind of an agnostic hope for something beyond the grave. But most people practically aren't that concerned because they're really trying to get what they can while they're here, right now. So I think all of the institutions of human society ultimately would be transformed. That a world predicated on a regime of competitive, adversarial individualism will change to a world characterized by mutualism, where each person is vying with the other person to serve the common good, to remove the ancient structures of oppression, because people are oppressed for lots of different reasons. The sex that they are, the class, the caste, the race, their educational level, whatever. So that entire system, I think it's the will of God in this day to invert all of it, right? So that we really remove this constant, drumbeat that is resonates throughout our culture of we all are aware of where we stand in a kind of a pecking order, what our status is, and what what our value is. That all needs to go away. We're all the children of one God.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. One of the things that, and racism was the follow-up, and you touched on it, Mr. Howe, so that's we don't even have to go too far into that.
Sure.
And so one of the things that's really happening in this generation, this day and time,
Right.
is social issues have become more and more at the forefront.
Right.
And one of those, other than racism, especially within America, but I
Right.
quite frankly think across the
Right.
globe, is questions and thinking about civil rights, human rights, but even acceptance of the LGBT community.
Right.
And within the Bahai faith, what is that conversation
Yeah.
like?
So first of all, for me as a Baha'i, I don't think it's all that big a deal. That this one issue should suddenly become so vexed. To me, it's there's so many things about who we are as human beings that we have to kind of grapple with, right? So, for example, as a Baha'i, if somebody has gender reassignment surgery, that person basically just says, okay, I'm a different gender now. The spiritual simile makes an update in the database and you just go on, right? What else around that issue?
Maybe gay marriage?
Yeah, gay marriage. I'm getting there, but there's another. I'm trying to build a little bit of a framework here of understanding. Okay, another thing is homophobia. We don't do that. That's so far away from who we are as believers. We're just not going to go there. But having said
also offensive oppression. That nobody should be discriminated against for their sexual orientation. That's a fundamental.
Right. Right.
right,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So the Baha'is would
Right.
support
Right.
anyone against that kind of oppression.
Now, having said that, and we see the whole kind of issue of sexuality and things through a slightly different lens, like not interested in becoming part of an argument, you know, or a discourse, which is a discourse of othering or disintegration or whatever.
Mhm.
Not even necessarily willing to see sexual identity as that essential to human nature.
Mhm.
Like basically, our eternal destiny is to move on from here.
Mhm.
And that we believe that the soul is neither male nor female,
Mhm.
right? So the acquisition of the virtues, serving the common good, sacrificing, and all that. Also, you know, in pretty much every religion has had laws that govern personal status. So
Mhm.
there is no provision within the Baha'i teachings for, you know, two people of the same sex to marry each other.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't exist, and probably never will exist in that way. But we would disagree with the whole idea, like this should be like the litmus test, you know, whether you're a progressive person or, because we're not hating on anybody, and you can be gay and become a Baha'i, no problem, right? Not going to recognize, because marriage really in the Baha'i teachings is for the procreation of children. It's a social institution that has a certain purpose. So, you know, it's really hard for, like, we live in a time when the conversation has become very pressurized, very, like, around polarizing and, you know, filled with passion and everything like that. It's just kind of, as a Baha'i, want to reserve the right to say, I really don't want to get drawn in at that level. You know, I've worked in a profession pretty much my whole adult life, you know, where I deal with gay people and transgender people and so on, like every day. I don't want them to like think badly about me because I belong to a religion that doesn't endorse or sanctify like same-sex marriage. But it doesn't mean that I'm gonna like go around moralizing, hating people, and all that. So I'm trying really hard to have a middle ground here. Like the Baha'i teachings don't sanction that, and we're not gonna sort of like change that teaching because we don't believe we can. Like I believe it was like the laws of God. This is what's prescribed. I'm thinking in 50 years or 100 years, like this whole debate will look very different. Like we'll think
Across the
differently
board. Yeah.
about identity. We'll think different about the institutions of marriage. Quite frankly, there's a whole lot going on in the world, conversations about human nature and so on, that we're also not so aligned with. You know what I mean? Really hoping to have a space that would not become polarized. So yeah, if I'm being honest, I have to acknowledge like that the Baha'i teachings don't endorse gay marriage, for example, but it's not the case that they also don't sanction oppression of anybody for any reason. In fact, I'm going to be your advocate, not for gay marriage, but for your identity. If that's who you are, if you're an alcoholic, I'm not going to moralize against you, you know, or I shouldn't say alcoholic, but let's just say you like to drink. It's not my place to come. I, as a Baha'i, have signed up, you know, for this set of obligations. It's completely
Baha'is don't drink alcohol.
free will.
Baha'is
Well, but
do
we
not
don't drink alcohol.
So
Yeah.
he
So-
left that out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. Good
No,
point.
that's
Thank
good to
you.
know.
Does that make sense? Like, you
No,
know,
it makes total sense.
I don't have like a bumper sticker answer, and it's a question, quite frankly, that frightens me because it so easily feeds into like agendas of polarization on all sides. You know, I believe in the unity of the human race. You know, come, let's sit together. You know, let's talk. Maybe you'll change my mind or whatever. Let's talk. Let's be reasonable. Let's have a dialogue. On either side, you know what I mean? Like
So-
I'm aware that there are people with really intense, passionate feelings around this issue.
So, as it relates to the Baha'i faith, is there is there like a clergy that exists, and in retrospect of our current conversation about homosexuality, do you have pastors? What do you call your clerical leaders?
I'm going to pass off to Tom because I've been talking for a while here.
You're getting tired of talking now.
I'm never tired of
No, we
talking.
don't. Actually,
You can do a good
I'll
job.
give you a shorter answer than him.
There you go. Bingo.
He's very long-winded. We don't have any clergy at all. Full stop. No
Okay.
clergy. No permanent people that are appointed or elected like
Okay.
that. We do have, every year, we have an election of local spiritual assembly members.
Okay.
And every adult behind the community is eligible. So men, women, gay, straight, I guess, I mean, it doesn't really matter, could have eligibility to be elected. And then every year there's a new election. It's a very spiritual thing, no nominations, very quietly, prayerfully. People just select 9 people from among the community that they're aware of, and they vote, and the ballots are collected, and the top 9 vote-getters are elected, and they become the spiritual assembly for that year. And the next year, the same thing happens again. Every April 21st is the day we do that.
And is there believed to be any specific anointing or a spiritual endowment upon these people to be, and their role? What is their role specifically then?
Their individual role is nothing. The assembly's role, the assembly, which is the group. So it's very interesting. In the Baha'i faith, there's no individual authority.
Gotcha.
Full stop. There's only group decision making, right? So these assemblies embrace diversity, which is very protective, right? Because then you get a lot of different ideas of people coming together, and there's a spirit of consultation that Baha'is go through that's very unique, I think, where all of the members of the assembly try to give forth their ideas with a spirit of detachment and sort of give their idea as a gift to the group and then let it go, right? This is the ideal. And in prayerful consultation, even disagreeing with each other is quite encouraged. The spark of the clash of opinions can lead to the spark of truth, is the statement. So we try to reach decision-making in this group process, bringing in a lot of diverse views, encouraging diverse views, so that the truth can be reached quickly. And then we follow the guidance of the assembly. So the assembly itself is the authority, the group.
I want to know, in closing, perspective on abortion, which definitely with conversations around parent
So
planning.
I want to add what Tom said, though. There's no campaigning, electioneering slate of nominees or anything. It's a totally spiritual, like, just matter of conscience. Think about, like, prayerfully who you think would be the 9 who should serve together. So yeah, the question of abortion, again, you know, this is a very polarized subject. Bottom line is, the Baha'i faith does not accept abortion as, you know, especially not as a means of like birth control or something like that. Now, there are cases when a woman, in consultation with her doctor, like maybe her life is endangered, or maybe, you know, the fetus is not going to be viable at all, or something like that. That's a matter of her conscience in consultation with her doctor and seeking prayerful guidance, right? We're not going to say that somebody, like, there's never, ever, 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 you know, like a case where, you know, an abortion might be indicated. But it's, you know, it's something that we certainly cherish life, absolutely. Even the life of disabled people or people, you know, with very, very serious impairments, where like abortion should never be used as an option, you know, just to make your life more convenient or something like that. But it's not an absolute, you know, proscription. Like, there may well be a circumstance where that.
And I think the decision is left with the individual.
Left with the individual, yeah.
So a decision of that sort will be left to the individual. It wouldn't be legislated at all.
Gotcha.
Within a framework, though, I mean, they're definitely like our, you know, some of the things I've been saying, like that guidance was in the writings, like that would be shared with the person and family. And so, obviously, it's a very grave decision.
Yeah, it is.
It shouldn't be taken
lightly.
cavalierly.
Yeah, totally agree. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been excellent, and I look forward to speaking further as the days and the week comes.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you've allowed me into your space today, and I've learned something that I never knew that I would ever learn, and I think that's going to be a gift to me and a gift to all those who will watch.
Yeah.
So thank you, and may God continue to bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's your it's our space, not just our space.
Right.
But if you want to learn more, too, you go to Bahai.org or baha'u'llah.com. I think it actually is.
Bahai.org.
Or Google it.
Bahai.org.
Or Google it.
Google it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Grateful. So grateful. Thank you so
God
much.
bless you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And stay tuned to next time. We have another segment coming forth, and I think it'll be interesting for us as we experience the worship experience, what the sanctuary experience is like with the community soon. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay.